The mind, this remarkable faculty with which we have been endowed, is both our most potent instrument and our most perilous battleground. It is here that the seeds of truth and deception alike take root, where the whispers of heaven and the mutterings of hell contend for our loyalty. If you would see a man's life, do not first look at his hands or his feet, but at his thoughts. For as a man thinks, so he becomes. We are creatures of habit, both in body and in soul. Just as the muscles of the arm grow strong or weak depending on their use, so too does the mind form patterns, a pathway well trodden or left to wilderness. But the question before us is not whether our minds are shaped, but by what. The world has no shortage of tutors eager to mold our thinking. Some benevolent, others less so. The newspapers, the advertisements, the casual conversation of neighbors, the endless stream of moving pictures and pleasant distractions, they all, in their own way, seek to tell us what is real, what is worthy of our concern, what ought to stir our passions or lull us into apathy. There is, however, another voice, one that does not clamor for attention as these others do, but speaks with a quiet, and it is a voice that does not flatter, nor deceive, nor entice with half-truths. It does not pander to our vanities, nor encourage our complacencies. It is, in fact, rather inconvenient to the natural man, for it does not tell him what he most wishes to hear, but what he most needs to hear. It bids him to rise, to think, to become something more than he presently is. And here, my friends, is where the renewal of the mind must begin. Not in the mere accumulation of knowledge, as if one might stack truths upon one another like bricks, and thereby build a fortress against falsehood. No, for knowledge alone, like a sword left in its sheath, is of no use to a man unless he learns to wield it. Nor is it sufficient to admire virtue from a distance, nodding politely in its direction while making no effort to conform ourselves to it. The mind is not renewed by passive acquaintance, but by active participation. It is by exercising our reason, by testing every claim, by loving the truth enough to pursue it, that we begin to reshape our thoughts. Perhaps some will say, "But I have always thought this way. Can the mind truly be changed?" Ah, but have you not seen how a tree, bent from youth, may yet be straightened with the firm and patient hands of the gardener? Have you not observed how the river, though it has carved its course through the valley for 1,000 years, may yet be redirected by the wisdom of the engineer? Do not believe the lie that the mind is a prison from which no escape is possible. It is not stone but clay, and though habit has hardened it in places, it is not beyond the reach of transformation. But if the mind is to be renewed, it must be done deliberately. The man who simply drifts, who allows his thoughts to go where they will, is like a ship without a rudder, carried wherever the current pleases. And make no mistake, the world has a current, and it does not flow toward truth. It is an easier thing to let the mind decay than to discipline it, just as it is easier to let a garden be overrun with weeds than to tend it daily. So what must we do? First, we must guard what enters. A man who values his health does not consume every morsel set before him without regard to its nourishment. Likewise, the mind must be fed with that which strengthens rather than weakens. What are we reading? What are we listening to? What conversations do we engage in? If we spend our days steeped in idle gossip, in cynicism, in half-truths and indulgent fantasies, can we be surprised when our thinking becomes muddled, our convictions unsteady, our courage feeble? Next, we must think, truly think. It is a rare thing in our age to find a man who prefers the discipline of thought to the ease of amusement. To think is to labor, to wrestle with ideas rather than accept them at face value, to question not only the claims of others but the assumptions of our own hearts. It is not enough to feel that something is right. The man who relies on feeling alone will be led astray as easily as a leaf is carried by the wind. For what feels true today may feel false tomorrow, and without reason to anchor him, he will be forever adrift. Lastly, we must act upon what we know. There is a peculiar danger in learning without obedience, for knowledge, when hoarded and not lived out, becomes a burden rather than a blessing. The truth that is known but not practiced becomes a dead thing, like a light hidden under a bushel. If the mind is truly to be renewed, it cannot be a matter of theory alone. It must change the way we live, the way we speak, the way we love and serve and give. Some may scoff at this and say, "But surely the renewal of the mind is an inward affair. What has it to do with action?" To them I would say, observe the craftsman at his work. The carpenter who learns the principles of his trade does not sit idle, content in his knowledge. He builds. The musician who studies the laws of harmony does not rest in mere understanding, he plays, and so it must be with a renewed mind. Thought must give birth to deed, or else it is no true renewal at all. My friends, if you would be renewed in mind, you must set yourself to the task. There is no shortcut, no effortless transformation, no sudden awakening to wisdom without toil. But take heart, for though the path is not easy, it is sure, and though it requires discipline, it leads to joy. Let us then leave behind the sluggishness of thought, the dullness of unexamined opinion, the easy acceptance of half-truths. Let us instead pursue that which is true, noble, and pure, with minds sharpened by reason, hearts strengthened by conviction, and lives lived in accordance with the truth. For in the end it is not the mind left to wander, nor the heart left to drift, that finds peace. It is the mind, renewed, shaped by truth and directed by wisdom, that stands firm, unshaken, and free. Ah, but some may protest, saying, "What of the struggle? What of the moments when the mind resists renewal, when old habits, old doubts, and old distractions clamor for attention?" Do not be dismayed, my friends. For the work of renewal is not a single act accomplished in a day, but a continual shaping, a daily pressing onward. Consider the blacksmith at his forge. He does not strike the iron once and expect it to be molded to his will. No, he heats it, he hammers it, he returns it to the fire, and he hammers it again. Over and over, through heat and force, he works upon the metal until it takes the form he desires. And so it is with the mind. One does not become wise, discerning, and steadfast in an instant. It is by daily training, by constant refining, by perseverance in the face of resistance, that the mind is transformed. Indeed, let us not be surprised when opposition arises. For the moment a man determines to renew his mind, he will find that he has stirred a great many adversaries. There are forces, seen and unseen, that prefer him as he was, who would rather he remain distracted, shallow, and passive. The world around him will continue to whisper its easy lies. There is no need to think too deeply. There is no reason to question what is popular. There is no use in resisting the tide. And then there is his own nature, the part of him that would rather choose comfort over truth, ease over effort. The mind, left to itself, prefers the well-worn paths of least resistance. It is easier to be entertained than to be educated, easier to follow the familiar than to challenge assumptions, easier to drift than to direct one's course with intention. But, my friends, let us not mistake ease for peace. The unexamined mind is not at rest. It is simply unguarded. It is like a city with its walls broken down, vulnerable to every invader, every wandering notion that seeks entrance. True peace is not found in passive ignorance, but in the confidence that comes from knowing what is true and holding fast to it. So then, let us be vigilant. Let us not surrender our minds to mere convenience, nor allow them to be shaped by whatever voices shout the loudest. Let us be deliberate in what we absorb, in what we ponder, in what we allow to take root. For the mind, once renewed, is a powerful thing. It sees with clarity where once there was confusion. It stands firm where once it wavered. It discerns truth from falsehood, substance from shadow, and it does not bend to every passing wind. And here, perhaps, lies the greatest secret of all. The renewal of the mind is not an end in itself, but a beginning. It does not merely change how we think, it changes who we are. It does not merely sharpen our intellect, it strengthens our very souls. It lifts us from the fog of passive existence and calls us into the fullness of life, thoughtful, awake, alive to the grandeur of truth. This, then, is our charge, to take up the task of renewing the mind, not as a burdensome duty, but as the great adventure that it is. Let us set aside the dullness of unthinking conformity and embrace the noble work of shaping our thoughts with wisdom. And in doing so, let us walk not as those who stumble in darkness, but as those who have seen the light, and who by it are made new. Ah, but one may ask, what then? What is the result of such a mind, diligently renewed, fiercely guarded, and shaped by truth? Does it make one a mere scholar, filled with knowledge but set apart from the common affairs of life? No, my friends, quite the opposite. A mind truly renewed does not withdraw from the world, but engages it all the more clearly, with eyes unclouded and judgment unshaken. It does not retreat into the comforts of idle speculation, but steps forward with the courage to act. The man who renews his mind does not merely think better, he lives better. He is no longer enslaved to every whim of culture, no longer tossed about by the fears and anxieties that plague those who have no firm foundation. He does not wake each morning wondering what new philosophy or passing trend he must bow to, for he has already set his course by what is true, and his feet are steady. Consider for a moment the world as it is. The restlessness, the dissatisfaction, the never-ending cycle of people seeking happiness, yet never quite finding it. They chase after new ideas, new pleasures, new movements, as though the answer to their longing is just beyond the next horizon. And yet, with all their striving, they do not find peace. Why? Because their minds are shaped not by truth, but by whatever is most convenient, most flattering, or most popular at the time. They have surrendered their minds to be molded by others, rather than taking up the sacred duty of renewing them in truth. But the man whose mind is renewed, he is free, not free in the way the world understands freedom, which so often means mere indulgence, but truly free. Free from deception, free from the tyranny of passing opinions, free to think with clarity and to act with purpose. He is not a reed bending to every wind, but an oak with deep roots. The storms may come, the voices may shout, but he stands. And so, my friends, let us not delay. The work of renewing the mind is urgent, for every moment that passes is a moment in which we are shaped, either by wisdom or by folly. We cannot afford to be passive, to drift, to assume that we will stumble into truth without effort. No, let us instead take up this work with diligence and with joy. Let us read, let us think, let us test every claim and measure it against what is good and right. Let us discard what is false, no matter how comfortable it may be, and cling to what is true, no matter how difficult. For in the end, the renewal of the mind is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is a transformation. It is the difference between walking in blindness and walking in light, between being led astray and standing firm, between mere existence and the fullness of life. And that, my friends, is a treasure worth pursuing. But let us not be naive. This pursuit of a renewed mind, this training of thought and discipline of intellect, will not come without cost. The man who commits himself to truth will soon find himself at odds with the world around him. He will be thought peculiar, perhaps even dangerous, for nothing unsettles the comfortable more than the presence of one who will not drift along with them. You see, the world has little patience for the man who insists on thinking for himself. It prefers the easily swayed, the man who does not ask too many questions, who accepts what he is given without challenge. It smiles upon those who conform, who adopt whatever opinions are fashionable, who never pause long enough to examine whether the ideas they champion today will be ridiculed tomorrow. But you, if you commit yourself to the renewal of your mind, will not find yourself among such company. You will stand apart, not because you seek isolation, but because the path of truth often leads away from the crowds. And yet do not despair, for though this road may be lonely at times, it is the only road that leads to clarity, to wisdom, and to the deep and abiding peace that cannot be found in the shifting sands of popular opinion. Yes, there will be moments when you grow weary. There will be moments when you look around and wonder if it would not be easier to simply go along with what is expected, to surrender the effort of critical thought in exchange for the ease of acceptance. The temptation will be strong, for there is a peculiar exhaustion that comes from standing against the tide. But take heart, for truth has always been worth the struggle, and you will find, in time, that though the road may be steep, it is also rich with reward. A renewed mind is a light in the darkness, a fortress against deception, a wellspring of wisdom from which others may drink. It will shape not only your own life, but the lives of those around you, for clarity of thought breeds clarity of speech, and clarity of speech has the power to awaken those who still slumber. So press on. Read widely and read well. Think deeply and think honestly. Seek truth, not for its convenience, but for its own sake. And do not grow weary, for the effort you spend in shaping your mind is not wasted. It is an investment in a life lived fully, wisely, and without regret. And perhaps one day, when others see the strength of your convictions, the peace of your spirit, the unwavering steadiness of your mind, they will ask, "What is your secret?" And then you may smile, for you will know that the answer was never hidden. It was waiting all along in the quiet discipline of a mind renewed. And so, my friends, we return to the simple yet profound truth. The renewal of the mind is both a discipline and a delight, a challenge and a triumph. It is not a thing achieved in a moment, nor is it a matter of mere intelligence, but of perseverance. For the mind, like the body, is shaped by what it consumes, by the labors it undertakes, and by the habits it forms. There are those who believe that their thinking is beyond their control, that their minds are but mirrors reflecting whatever the world places before them. But this is a deception. You are not merely a product of your surroundings, you are a steward of your thoughts. If you do not choose what shapes your mind, the world will choose for you. And if the world chooses, it will not choose wisdom, nor virtue, nor courage, but convenience, indulgence, and conformity. But you, if you would be more than merely a leaf in the wind, if you would be steadfast, unshaken, a beacon in a time of confusion, must take up the task with purpose. You must decide, here and now, that your thoughts will not be left to chance. You must resolve to test what you hear, to measure what you believe, to submit your understanding not to the pressures of the moment, but to the unchanging standard of truth. Do not fear the cost. There is always a cost to thinking, but there is a greater cost to failing to think. The man who does not guard his mind may find too late that he has surrendered it. The man who does not train his reason may wake one day to discover he has been led into folly. But the one who renews his mind will find that he is not easily deceived. He will find that he is not easily shaken, and, perhaps most remarkably, he will find that his mind, once disciplined and strengthened, becomes a source of life not only for himself but for others. For a renewed mind does not remain alone. It speaks, it shares, it illuminates. The truth it holds cannot be locked away, for truth is like fire. It spreads, it warms, it lights the way. And as you grow in clarity, in wisdom, in the discipline of thought, you will find that you are not simply guarding your own mind, but awakening the minds of those around you. What then shall we do? Shall we drift as so many do, allowing the winds of culture to shape our thoughts for us? Shall we choose ease over understanding, comfort over conviction? Or shall we take up this noble task, embracing the hard work of thinking rightly, of seeking truth, of standing firm? The choice is before you. But remember this, The mind, once renewed, is never the same. It is made strong, it is made free, and it is made alive. And that, my friends, is a secret worth knowing. You said, but let me remind you, my friends, that this renewal, this shaping of the mind, is not an end in itself. It is not enough to think rightly if one does not also live rightly. The mind that is filled with truth but does not act upon it is no better than a lantern left unlit. Knowledge, when hoarded and not applied, grows stagnant. Wisdom, when admired but not followed, is of no more use than a map that is never read. The true test of a renewed mind is not in how much it knows, but in how it moves the heart, the hands, and the will. What good is it to discern right from wrong if one does not choose the right? What good is it to recognize the call to virtue if one does not answer? The mind and the soul must walk together, for when thought and action are divorced, we are left with the empty shell of wisdom, hollow and lifeless. And yet many deceive themselves in this. They believe that if they have read enough, debated enough, or pondered long enough, they have done their duty. But thought alone is not the goal. Truth is. And truth is not merely something to be admired from a distance, but something to be lived. It is a fire that refines, a light that guides, a path that demands to be followed. This is why the renewal of the mind is not a passive endeavor. It is not simply about avoiding falsehood, but about actively pursuing what is good, noble, and true. It is not merely about discarding deception, but about filling the mind with that which strengthens and sustains. And, perhaps most importantly, it is not only about shaping oneself, but about becoming a force for clarity and wisdom in a world that desperately needs both. For, my friends, look around you. Is it not evident that the world is in need of minds that are clear, steadfast, and undeceived? Do we not see confusion, contradiction, and manipulation at every turn? The world does not suffer from a lack of information. It suffers from a lack of discernment. There is no shortage of voices, no shortage of opinions, no shortage of those who would shape your thinking to serve their own ends, but there is a great shortage of those who are willing to think truly, to seek what is right, and to stand firm in it. And so I urge you, be among them. Do not be content with the shallow thinking that is so common. Do not allow the noise of the age to dictate the course of your mind. Do not shrink back from the challenge of reason, of discernment, of deep and honest thought. Rather embrace it, pursue it, and let it shape not only how you see the world, but how you walk in it. For in the end, the renewal of the mind is not simply about intellect. It is about life itself. It is about seeing clearly, choosing wisely, and living fully. It is about standing firm when others waver, speaking truth when others falter, and being a light when others are lost in shadow. And that, my friends, is a calling worth answering. You said, "So now, my friends, the choice stands before you. Will you leave your mind to be shaped by the currents of the world, tossed and turned by every passing trend, every empty philosophy, every voice that demands your allegiance without earning your trust? Or will you take up the noble task of renewal, of sharpening your discernment, of seeking what is true, of standing firm when others bow to convenience? Do not be deceived. This is no small matter. A mind left unguarded will be taken captive, a mind left untrained will be led astray, and a mind left unrenewed will wither, losing its strength, its clarity, its very ability to recognize truth when it stands before it. But a mind renewed, that is a force to be reckoned with. A mind renewed is a mind that sees clearly, thinks deeply, and chooses wisely. A mind renewed is not swayed by deception, not overcome by fear, not enslaved to the opinions of the age. A mind renewed is a light in the darkness, a refuge for those who are lost, a steady guide in a world that has forgotten how to think. So I urge you, wake up. Take hold of your thoughts before the world takes hold of them for you. Train your mind as you would train your body. Guard it as you would guard your most precious treasure. Seek wisdom. Test every idea. Refuse to be lulled into complacency. For the world has enough followers. It has enough voices repeating what they have been told. Enough minds content with mere comfort. What it lacks, desperately, are men and women whose minds are strong, whose thoughts are sharp, whose convictions are unshakable. Be among them, stand among them, and let the renewal of your mind not be the end, but the beginning of a life lived with purpose, with courage, and with truth.